So Dr. Suzanne Leonard is here today to talk about technologies for improving swine production. She's an agricultural engineer with a Bachelor of Science from North Carolina State University and a PhD from Iowa State University. She currently serves as an assistant professor and extension specialist at the North Carolina State University. Her research is focused on livestock housing, ventilation, and precision technologies that are very producer focused and applicable to the industry. Just take a quick search online about her name and you can see how many articles she has that are very producer related. So we are very excited to hear from her today. So thank you.
All right, I believe I'm on. Perfect. Well, thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate you taking the time to spend with me and talk a little bit about the different technologies we have for swine production in the breeding environment. So I love talking about technologies and applied farm technologies specifically because everyone comes in with different ideas of what that looks like. We have everything from the pie in the sky of the robots feeding the pigs and doing everything totally autonomously without the humans. And then you have some folks that think, installing the remote gate opener at the entrance to the farm is where technology belongs and should end, right? So a lot of different schemas and ideas about what precision livestock farming, or PLF, actually looks like on farms. And so for my talk today, we're going to land somewhere in the middle. So broadly, when we talk about precision livestock farming, we're talking about technologies that can be used to improve the way we manage animals, their individual productivity or whole herd productivity, as well as producer profit margins to make sure we can raise them in a sustainable way moving forward, with also a focus on that critical piece of animal health and welfare. So there's a lot of different things that go into these technologies and how they actually evolve and come to be on farms. So today we're going to go through just a brief overview and then dive into some specific technologies that I think might be of interest in this group today. So I always like to start off talking about the things technologies can solve and then the things they can't solve for you. So technologies can indeed enable more precise management of our animals. So right now we're often managing at the whole barn level, but if we can get down to managing based off a single room or even a single pen, or ideally down to that individual pig level, then we're truly going to help that individual animal reach its genetic potential. If we can cater all of our conditions, nutrition, and social behavior, all of these pieces to the individual animal, that's really where we see our greatest efficiencies and greatest productivities. They can also improve the productivity of not just our animals, but also our humans. If we can take some of the tedious tasks or automate some things from our human standpoint, then that frees up more time for our caretakers to spend on these higher order decision-making things and just improve the overall farming aspect for our workers in that barn. By freeing up more time from our caretakers by using these technologies, that then gives our caretakers more time to actually spend focusing on the animals themselves. If you think about the days of hand feeding when you go through, that takes up a lot of time that human is not really interacting with the animal, right? You're scooping feed, and at least whenever I do it, because I can only do one thing at a time, I'm not even really looking at that animal. But if you put in the automated feeding system, that frees up a lot of time for your caretaker to then go through, interact, and do other things. Using technologies to get this more precise, more efficient management can lead to improved sustainability. By improving our feed efficiencies and the margins that we're operating on, then we can have fewer input resources, reducing electricity usage, water usage, all that good stuff in order to improve our sustainability as an industry overall. Now, when we're talking about sustainability and resources, this also includes health interventions and antibiotics. If we can identify those sick animals sooner using continuous monitoring technologies that can pick up on those minute changes before those clinical signs occur, then we can treat the animals earlier, potentially reducing the spread, reducing the impact of those diseased or down days on our animals, and therefore overall have a more sustainable system. And by doing all of these things, it helps to reduce our production costs overall, if we can get more productivity out of each individual animal. Now, technologies can come in a plug-and-play system where you take them out of the box, hook it into the outlet, set it up where it needs to go, and then it's free and good to operate without very little, with very little human interaction or setup needed. But They are not assemble and abandon. You can't just put the technology up and assume that it's going to be perfectly accurate, maintenance-free, totally autonomous for the entire lifespan of the barn, the technology, the system. And this is where we see a lot of breakdowns with technologies when they're actually implemented on farms. You know, you can put them up and there's not a lot of effort, but you're still going to have to check in from time to time. You know, if you bring a new employee on the farm, you're still going to check in from time to time. And the same situation with your technology. You can't just set it up and expect it to be totally autonomous all of the time. Technologies cannot fully replace our human caretakers. We know that our barns are really dynamic environments and things are always changing, especially as our facilities age and wear and tear over time. And so these technologies are never going to fully replace the human caretaker and get the robot farm of the future, right? But we can put these technologies in specific places to help increase the additional time that our workers have by not having to do these technology automated tasks. Technologies cannot overcome poor husbandry, poor management, poor farm culture. Just like an athlete cannot out-train a bad diet, your technology cannot overcome a manager or a caretaker who isn't doing their job. Even if these technologies are telling you the appropriate actions to take, giving you the right signals or suggestions, someone still likely has to go and actually do that prompt, carry out that action. And so you still have to make sure that your people are good people doing the appropriate things in a timely fashion. Technologies can't solve those problems for you, with the exception of some people tracking technologies, but yeah, kind of a gray area there that I'm not going to go into. Technologies also cannot deviate from what we tell them to do. So on the one hand, this is very comforting because it means that robots are pretty unlikely to actually take over the world unless we tell them to do that, right? But on the other hand, if you're talking to a caretaker and maybe you can't communicate exactly, but they can get the gist or understand what you mean. A technology doesn't understand what you mean. It understands exactly what you tell it. So making sure that when you're programming or setting them up, you have to be very precise in what you're asking it to do and what you expect it to tell you back. So there are a lot of different types of PLF or precision technology systems, but in general, I wanted to go over just some basic steps and pieces of how these systems work broadly overall. First, they're going to collect some kind of information, whether this be a temperature measurement or taking an image. They're going to have to actually measure, collect, take something in order to then move forward and analyze that piece of data and information. Now, this analysis piece is often a proprietary analysis owned by the company that you're buying the product from. But this is sometimes a good thing in that the analysis already happens for you, fully automated, so that way you as the person don't have to do any of that data analysis piece. Because ideally, out of the technology, we want to receive an action, decision, some suggestion or prompt, and ideally we want it to keep a record of what happened and what the result was. So in this fully automated precision technology system, this is where the human interaction should be happening with the system, right? Most of our staff and people don't want to live in the collection phase or the analysis stage like us scientists do, right? We want to stay on farm with that decision, action. We don't want data, we want information coming out of these technology systems. Now, ideally, after our technology system goes through and does this process and gets to a decision, it's going to go back and do it again, right? We want it to be a multi-faceted process where it goes through and continuously operating and ideally autonomously without a lot of human interaction to do its job. Now, the best PLF systems are actually also going to have a feedback loop. And sometimes this may be called active learning or adaption, some kind of word like that to imply that after you make a decision and you go back and recollect that information, you can then have some information on how good that decision was. Did we make the right decision? Did we take the right action or not? And then the most advanced or the best systems are going to be able to actually incorporate that information into the next decision and analysis that they make. So that way they can continually learn and adapt. And this is really helpful in our dynamic production systems because then as those animals are growing within each cycle, as your facilities are changing over time as they age, your technology systems can then be more adaptive and dynamic on their own without having to be retrained, re-updated, or a whole new system bought in order to operate. So when it comes to all of the technologies that are out there and commercially available, which ones are worth your time and investment? The first place that I always like to start is make sure that the technology solves a problem that you actually have. Being at the university and working with technology companies and livestock producers, I often have startups or technology companies talk to me about this idea for a widget or a gizmo that they have. And it's a really cool thing, and it can do this really neat process, but it doesn't really solve a problem. It does a cool thing, but it maybe solves a problem that we don't really have in swine production. So there's lots of technologies out there, but make sure that they're tackling a problem that you have on your farm. And moreover, it's a problem that you see solving has value. There are a lot of things that I do in my daily life with admin and paperwork, and they're annoying, and it's a problem, and I don't like to do it. But if they were to be automated, would that actually have a lot of value in my life? Probably not, right? Depending on the aspect and what you're looking at. So make sure it's a problem you actually have, and that solving that problem is going to give you some value. And that value could be in saved time, saved energy, frustration, or an actual cost or reduced input resources. I like to approach purchasing the technology by looking at what the current and future goals of your production system are. If you're looking to expand or convert from individual to group housing, how does this piece of technology help you get from where you are today to where you would like to be? And then, of course, these technologies are all sold by companies that are trying to get you to buy their product. So always ask to see the data on what these technologies are and the benefits they're claiming. Make sure that those benefits can actually be backed up by the data that they produce. Some of these have been evaluated by third parties such as universities. At NC State, we do some of these technology evaluations, as well as by third party or independent companies. And then also look for other producers that have these technologies. So you can get some outside perspective, and it's not just the salesman convincing you that they have the silver bullet, but you can actually get some input from other people that have interacted with this technology in ideally a real life production scenario in order to better understand how it may or may not fit within your own system. When it comes to evaluating return on investment with technologies, this can be a little complicated. You have to weigh all the costs and the benefits, but those can be not as clear for technologies as they are with some other nutritional products, say. So the costs outright, you're going to have to buy the technology, the equipment. You're going to have to likely add some infrastructure, depending on when your facility was built, if you need more outlets, electricity power, internet if you need that on your farm. Most technologies are going to have some thing to keep them up to date, whether that be their own inherent active learning process. Some technologies run based off a subscription fee, where you pay so many cents per pig that run through that system, or a monthly fee in order to continue using that. You're also going to have maintenance and replacement of the technologies themselves. We have tough barn environments, not always ideal for putting these high-tech sensitive chips into our facilities, so keep that in mind as well. And on cost, it also is going to take a lot of time out of your day to learn how to use this piece of technology. For you to learn it, for your barn staff to learn it, whoever is going to be operating and interacting, it's going to take them some time to get up to speed. And initially, it's going to take them a lot more time to do the same tasks they were doing before. But on the benefit side, again, we can reduce the inputs and outputs, increase profitability on our farms, and improving that pig productivity and health is a big part of it, but also the welfare piece. You see some behavioral changes that may be positive when you start implementing more options and opportunities for those animals, but those things can be hard to quantify if that end product isn't able to be sold at a premium. But going back to our social license piece that was talked about earlier today, I think there are still tangible benefits from those things. Then, of course, technology is trying to reduce the amount of labor on farms. Think about the amount of time you can save. But I think there's also a lot of value in reducing frustration and increasing job satisfaction. If I can take that one task that I hate doing off of my plate with a piece of technology, that is going to make my day-to-day life so much better. So I think it can really help improve that cultural piece and help with retention. All right, so we're going to go through a few breeding herd and barn management technologies that I think are relevant. And there's a ton of different technologies out there that are available, so I just sort of cherry-picked a few that I thought would be good for today. And of course, disclaimer, I'm not talking about any of these in a particular endorsement, just talking about the technologies in general and throwing up some brands and examples, not necessarily an endorsement one way or the other. So I'm an ag engineer. I love the environment and ventilation and indoor barn management. And I think when it comes to technologies, this is our lowest hanging fruit. There are a ton of sensors out there that automate the monitoring of, not just temperature in multiple places throughout your barn, but also relative humidity and gas concentrations. When it comes to the environment that our pigs are raised in and how it actually feels to that animal, the effective environment, it's not just temperature. In the barn, we're typically measuring only temperature, but we also have impacts from relative humidity and gas concentrations and also airspeed. These are all really important pieces, especially talking about that heat stress situation. And so the more information we can have going into our ventilation controllers, the better off we can be. Now, gas concentrations and humidity are typically more of concern in lower minimum ventilation situations, and so these can help you fine-tune that. A lot of these are, just straight 0 to 10 volt, 4 to 20 milliamp outputs that can be directly wired into most modern controllers in order to help make those ventilation and staging decisions. A lot of them also offer automated recording for data logging or alerts. Everybody on every farm I've ever been on, they have that one sheet in the barn where they write down the highs and the lows and no one ever looks at it. But you can put a sensor in there and it can actually give you push alerts, push alarms, and not just give you these 2 data points each day, but give you more of a curve so you can see the amount of variation and where you're actually at and get you a better picture of the environment those pigs are actually incorporating and living in. A lot of these also come with cloud-based services, so that way remote monitoring is possible. This is nice for biosecurity because if you're the regional manager, you don't have to go to every barn to check on everything. You can do it all remotely, but again, with the caveat that you have to have some kind of connectivity on farm. Some of the downsides of these environmental sensors are that they do have a limited lifespan and typically a fairly high purchase cost for the gas sensors. So most of these are going to be an electrochemical sensor, meaning that they pull in an air sample, do a chemical reaction in order to tell you the concentration, and then they reverse it and redo it. So most of those are going to have a year or less lifespan, so it's pretty frequent swapping out of these sensors, and they're usually going to be on the higher end of what you can of what's available specifically dedicated for livestock environments. So a lot of these sensors that can measure ammonia and CO2, for example, you can buy some for cheaper that are geared more towards indoor or housing environments, but you gotta watch and make sure they aren't self-calibrating, or some of them require fresh air stream, so a physical tube running out to fresh so they can recalibrate themselves periodically, because they do have a lot of drift over time. And of course, if you're going to put these expensive electrochemical sensors in your barn, you don't want to pressure wash them, so you're going to want to have some plan to take them out of the barn, make sure they're easy to take out whenever you need to so they don't get pressure washed. Just covering them up with a plastic bag is not a good idea. That becomes a condensing environment and can totally ruin your sensor. So don't recommend that point. So put them someplace in the barn so that way you can reach them and get them down whenever you need to, change them out as needed, but not someplace that they're going to be in the way and your workers are going to hang them up from the ceiling anyways. One of the most simple pieces of technology that I think is pretty applicable for all stages is a water meter. So it's good to have one per barn if you can, per room or even per pen is even better. This is, again, getting a much smaller management piece, and the smaller water line, the more expensive these water meters become. But it gives you really interesting information on how much those animals are consuming and using, and you can compare that data across different season groups, and as you make other feed and management changes, it can give you an idea of how they are impacting your overall footprint and sustainability impacts. And the other thing is that water intake is highly correlated to different diseases and heat stress. In nursery pigs, it's been proven that you can detect diarrhea 2 days before clinical signs by monitoring their water intake. So that's a huge advantage if you can treat it before you even start to see those major clinical signs. Some water meters offer internet connectivity, and of course there's an app for everything these days, so you can track and see all of this information remotely, but even if they don't, you can have a local logger on it to get an idea of how it goes over time. But if you do live in an area with hard water or you have a lot of mineral deposits, these can get clogged and of course shorten that lifespan of these devices. One of the most widely used technologies, I would say, would be records management software. How many of you guys are using one of these on your farms, some kind of electronic data entry? Yeah, a few. So these are essentially just taking your paper records and entering them directly into a database of some sort. They come in all different shapes and forms and sizes. Some are targeting just sow farms versus end-stage production. So a lot of different types and styles out there. They can be used to augment the paper records you're already doing or to completely replace them. So most of these, again, are direct electronic entry. You would carry your tablet into the barn or have a cell phone app, an app for everything, that as you're going through and those piglets are being born, you would enter how many pigs per sow, mark any mortalities, any vaccinations, things like that. It can be entered directly electronically, so that way you have it all in one space and you have it all up to date immediately. Because we do have some lags and some delays when you have the paper records that then later become electronic, and you have that lag and you can get some miscommunications in that process as well. So these often have spaces to put information on health, productivity, husbandry, the whole slew of information. Now with these software, it's important to consider when you're purchasing one of these how that data is going to be stored. If it needs to be stored locally by you on farm, is that going to be on a computer? Is it on a tablet? How much data are you actually generating? What is the size? How long is it retained if it's on a cloud storage?